in the studio here at part of the blog. I'm here with the Wookiee who is playing guard duty here on top of the table. There will be no beasties that interfere with this program on this tabletop during this show. Of that we can be certain. Before we begin today, I want to speak on a couple of things. The first issue is that all indications are that this entanglement that Israel has found itself in conjunction with America and Iran, is turning out very poorly. After Donald Trump made the accusation that Iran had surrendered to the Islamic nations and wouldn't be attacking them anymore, the very next thing we find is that indeed they have been pummeling once again the American bases and American facilities, any facility really used by America in those countries, as well as even the economic prowess of those countries, to show that to befriend the United States is to be the enemy of Islam. And so it has been exceedingly rough. We've also found that Russia, as one would expect, as one would do if you were in their position, has been providing targeting information to the Iranians, and now has also signed a deal to provide the Iranians a retort to what America did against Russia using the Taliban so very long ago, when Zygmunt Brzezinski and Jimmy Carter thought that it would be a fun thing to do to arm the Taliban to go and kill some Ruskies in Afghanistan, and the primary weapon of choice were Stinger missiles. The Russian version of that has now been offered to the Iranians, such that they will be able to shoot down American aircraft. And it is fair play, because that's exactly what America did in Afghanistan to oust the Russian influence during the Jimmy Carter administration. And of course, I'm reminded that this notion of regime change has already been tried 3 times by the United States. The Iranians elected a leader democratically who thought that it would be better to have the revenues from the oil that was extracted from its land benefit the people of Iran rather than America's oil corporations. And he began the process, as did every other nation around them, of nationalizing the oil fields and refineries. And when he started doing that, America decided, well, it's time for regime change. We're going to have a coup. And it was America that brought in the Shah to preclude the Iranians from controlling their oil and for being a puppet dictator of the United States. And then as the Shah decided, God, I played puppet dictator to the United States for so long. Eventually, I need to honor some of my responsibility to the Iranian people and do as my predecessor had done, which is to make certain that some of the benefits of the oil being extracted from Iran actually goes to benefit Iranians. At which point, it was Jimmy Carter who decided, nope, we're going to cut him off. And he brought in the Ayatollah. So this is that was our third regime change in Iran, all of which was nefarious, all of which was inappropriate, all of which was based on greed, all of which was counterproductive. And now we're bombing Iran, expecting regime change again. But this time, those who are protesting against the government are outnumbered anywhere from 50 to 100, sometimes even 1,000 to 1, who are standing behind the government. There has never been a case where a country has been bombed into oblivion that the people decide, boy, I just really like those people that are bombing us. I mean, it's just utterly stupid that this would result in regime change that would be favorable. But nonetheless, that is the situation. So the basis for the war was absolutely moronic. There was no chance it was going to prevail. Listen, I'm no fan of Islamic theocracies. I think all of the Islamic governments throughout the Middle East and the world are counterproductive. I would isolate and quarantine all of them, do no business with any of them, and not sell any of them weapons. That's how I would treat the menace that is Islam. But the fact that we do business with some and then try to control others has put America in a very difficult position and an immoral and ignorant position that is now turning on America. And what I want to emphasize is that by the U.S. bombing Iran, what it did was finally drive a wedge between the U.S. and all of the Middle East fiefdoms. And it's because even though they said you can't use our airspace, you can't use your bases, which was, many billions of dollars invested in them to attack Iran, the fact is that the Iranians still recognize that the way to prosecute the war was to go after the American installations, the CIA, the NSA, and military operations throughout the Middle East to deprive America of the ability to use them and to drive a wedge between Muslims and the United States. And they have been largely successful in doing so. And in doing so, what happened and the result of it's going to be that the age of the petrodollar, of America promising protection for those countries in exchange for them limiting the sale of gas and oil to the dollar, is now over. And it was quickly cratering as a result of America's malfeasance when they seized the sovereign wealth of Russia and used dollars as a weapon, and then sanctioned many countries in the world, including Iran, including Russia, including Venezuela, again using trade as a weapon and the dollar as a weapon. This gave rise to BRICS, which is now a viable alternative, and this bombing of Iran is the final wedge, such that the only way that America had any pretense of pretending to be solvent and being able to fund its debt was through the petrodollar, and now that era is over. So Trump assured the rapid decline economically of the United States. You see, every year now, the Fed must refinance $4 trillion worth of U.S. sovereign debt, and there are no takers. China is a seller, not a buyer. Saudi Arabia is a seller, not a buyer. The European Union is sellers, not buyers. Japan, the sellers, not buyers. So there are no buyers. So all that can happen now is to use quantitative easing, which is the illusion of solvency, creating fake money to buy the bonds. And as a result of that, you're inflating the money supply artificially, which will result in rapid runaway inflation. Wheelbarrows buying loaves of bread, wheelbarrows of dollars, useless dollars buying loaves of bread. That is what America has put itself into, that position, and this war on Iran simply exacerbated that situation. There is no other way to deal with it. So we have watched as Donald Trump has miscalculated again. And this act does not stand alone, because this is now the second time that on the pretense of negotiating, the Trump administration lied and went directly to war. And in addition, it follows the tariffs, whereby Trump made enemies of almost every country in the world with his belligerent use of tariffs, which all they did is increase the U.S. Trade imbalance and caused huge inflationary problems, increased unemployment. They didn't cause any new factory development. It was a disaster. And so it's been one miscue after another, and America is in a very, very difficult position as a result of all of this. And the world is just watching America dissolve. And that's really bad for Israel, because with its Gaza demolition as a response to the October 7th Islamic attack in Israel, the nation turned the world against it. It isolated itself from the world. It became hated by almost everyone. You can't find hardly anyone that speaks in favor of Israel today. And as a result of that, Israel put itself in a position where there was only one ally. And that ally turned out to be Rahab, who is Satan incarnate. He is the great betrayer. And so Netanyahu and his lust for warmongering isolated Israel so that it has one ally, and now it is the vassal of Donald J. Trump. And they seem to love the man who is betraying them. They have no idea what the prophets said. And it's too bad. The prophets wrote in their language, spoke to their people, and their prognosis is as clear as day, and they've never been wrong. But there's not an Israeli that is even listening to us speak of what they have done to themselves. And all the while, we have spoken vociferously of the unwinnable fight between missile and interceptor. And Israel now is learning that lesson. Even if an interceptor is able to prevail 95% of the time, it always loses. Not only is the difference in cost between interceptor and missile hugely slanted in favor of the missile, such that you suffer economic death in a war because of the difference in the cost. But the fact is that missiles and drones are readily manufactured. You can manufacture, and Iran is in the hundreds per day, where in some cases 100 is the sum total of interceptors that can be made over the course of a year. And so it's no way to win that war. You are always going to lose the battle between interceptor and missile and drone. And Israel doesn't seem to have learned that lesson, even when they ran out of interceptors and had to beg for peace and a ceasefire back a year ago. And here they are again in the same position. And it's not turning out well for Israel. Their primary air base was hammered the other day. Tel Aviv is getting hit hard, and so are the outskirts of Jerusalem. This is a war that Israel cannot win. I mean, the United States can't win this war. There is no possibility whatsoever that even together they have any chance of prevailing. It was a fait accompli as a loss before they engaged together. And, to go back over spilled milk, but remember Trump saying that he destroyed, absolutely obliterated their ability to make a nuclear bomb, and now we're bombing them again to keep them from having a nuclear bomb less than a year later. Was he lying then, or is he lying now, or is he lying all the time? And those are your choices. And then to see the Trumpites, the Magites, pounding their chests on how wonderful all this is, I'm flabbergasted as to how bright people can continue to make such foolish decisions. Yes, Iran is bad. So was Afghanistan, and so was Iraq. But by invading, America made them worse. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, as was Muammar Gaddafi. By taking them out and advocating regime change, the consequence was far worse. And look at the difference between Assad, a very bad guy, and now having Jolani and the Islamic State over Syria. Everything we touch, or the U.S. and Israel seem to do, turns out badly. And we're now just 70 days from entering the time of Israel's troubles. So collectively, this is a tragedy on behalf of the chosen people. The second thing I want to address is something I thought that I would eventually not have to discuss anymore. But a good friend of mine, a guy that was instrumental really to the distribution of information regarding Prophet of Doom when it was written, and then the first insights that were being derived from YadaYahowah, a man who booked many hundreds of radio programs for me. But once he booked the first of them, most of the hosts would have me back 4, 5, 6, 10, sometimes 20 and 30 times because the message was just so unlike anything their audience had ever heard before. And those radio programs were the impetus for both good and bad. We attracted a cult of conspirators that has turned out to be a cancer in our midst, and now has been diabolical away from us. And I want to speak to them in a moment. But we've also attracted many of those who are the most devoted members of the covenant family, who are going to be among the certainly be among those that Yahweh will be bringing home, so that we can be prepared for the responsibility ahead. So good and bad in that regard. Now, he was one of 100 recipients that received a letter that originally I thought was just sent to a handful of people, and I dealt with it very quickly and didn't make much of a comment regarding it, because it was sent to people who laughed it off and said, "Oh boy, these people are lost." But they decided to steal my email contacts, and they sent their stupidity out, belligerence out, to at least 100 people. And one of them was this friend of mine from years past that was so effective in promoting our books, and his response was, I don't know why these people are crazy, or why they think that anything that they say makes any sense. But nonetheless, the song that they attached to make their point is really a beautiful song. It was Sukkah. And it says, I think that you ought to promote those songs because they are magnificent. And, he is one of the most effective promoters of people and of things of this nature in the world. So congratulations to Leah. That was his view of them. And we've had 5 or 6, maybe up to 10 mutual exchanges since that time. A very interesting dialogue. And so the benefit of the belligerent Mother Goddess cult is that they've reintroduced me to somebody that I hadn't talked to in a while, as he was going through a very nasty divorce. But what I do want to talk to, since there were 100 people on the mailing list this time, is the claim that they have made. They are not very bright. In fact, stupid would be a better description of them. They decided that when we were reporting on the final word picture, whereby Dowd acknowledges that his mother, his M, was instrumental in his recovery. She, according to the final mashal, this would be Proverbs 31, it is apparent that she did not work alone. There were 3 references in it highly favorable to her Baal, her husband. And there is no way to interpret the message of the 31st mashal or proverb in any way other than gloriously positive. It is the message that first got Dowd's attention, sobered him up, got him to recognize his place as God's son and savior, such that he turned his life around. And it was the first of 2 presentations to him. The second was the 89th Mizmowr. And in it, as I say, Baal, which I had always viewed as a negative term because it is used many times negatively, was exceedingly positive. And Therefore, it's like a whole lot of Hebrew words that has a negative and positive connotation. It was used in that mashal just to prove this point, along with a title that also is positive from God's point of view, but also used in conjunction with Baal in a negative light, and that is Ashar. And Asher is the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. It's a name of the last one born to Leah's maid, the tribe of Asher. And she is ecstatic about it because she says that as a result of Asher, that she is going to be viewed as blessed and beneficial to all Israel for all time as a result of the birth of Asher. So she is proclaiming it in an exceedingly favorable way. As a matter of fact, she's essentially saying that as Asher, she is the positive side of what was stolen by Asherah on behalf of Satan as the queen of heaven and mother of God. She is viewing it as the word actually means by its actual definition, that she is beneficial and that she is a blessing to God's people as a result of this. And so here you have Asher, which is one of my very favorite Hebrew words, as you know, is the first word I translated out of Hebrew into English, that speaks of the benefits of a relationship is an exceedingly favorable term throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, confiscated also by Satan to convey a goddess that is used in conjunction with a false god in Baal and Asherah, whereby there were prophets speaking religiously of both and corrupting something that God viewed as favorable, in the case of Baal being husband. So the first thing that you would recognize is that for God to speak of someone using the term Baal, husband of the M of Dowd, that is as favorable as it could possibly be. To condemn a person based upon that reference is to be, well, as I've said, there's a word for that. It's stupid is the word for it. Rich is looking at the cables and the connectivity. He normally would be Johnny on the spot with that evaluation. That's the first aspect of it. You have to be smart enough to know that words have a dark and light side, and that context determines when that is positive and when it is negative. And in particularly in a mashal, this last one, the 31st, that is so overwhelmingly positive, literally saved the fate of humankind, that the woman called Ashar, the blessed and beneficial one, is married to her husband, her Baal, was instrumental in her being successful with Dowd as the son of God, restoring his relationship with Yahowah. It is a distinct honor to be her Baal, her husband, and to have worked in this regard, and to turn that into a negative. These belligerents, these malcontents, these malignant cults of mother goddess fame, infamy, ought to be ashamed, but they're too stupid to be ashamed. The second is they decided they would cite a really lousy translation of Yirmeyah 22, which I've created actually fairly decent translations of, so they didn't have to go and do their own horrible one, where, by the way, they erased Yahweh's name. It doesn't appear now in any of their writings. It went right back to Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, doing to Yahweh's name what the rabbis did long ago, erasing it. And this chapter, this 22nd of Yirmeyah, is condemning of the religious. It is exceedingly hostile to those who have acted in a way to negate the covenant by preferring to be religious, very much like Yahowah Isaiah in the first 10 chapters. Kind of mirrors the same attitude all the way down. And it says that one of the things that God was particularly annoyed at is the negation of his name and being replaced by Baal. And so God is actually demeaning those who erased his name. And yet, no one in all of human history, really, no one has ever done more to restore Yahweh's name than I. Did they know that? And they have not only corrupted Yahweh's name to create the illusion that God was a mommy and a daddy, which we proved to be untrue, so they've dropped that pretense and they've just gone back to, it can't be pronounced. It's a yo, it's a hey, it's a wah, it's a hey. We have no idea what it stands for. We have no idea how to pronounce it. We're regressing in this regard. They are doing what the 22nd chapter of Yirmeyah condemns, while condemning me for doing the opposite, which is restoring Yahweh's name. They're like Paul. They found a word that was repeated that they thought, well, if that word exists there and it was used in a negative light, then it must only be in a negative light, and we're going to condemn him for that. It is just grotesquely irresponsible. And again, I would ignore them had they not sent out their hate letter to 100 people. But they did. Why, by the way, lying about everything, pretending they were doing their little study and they were quiet, they were good little boys and girls, and they were just minding their own business, when in fact, their parting salvo was to condemn me. That's how they began. Every single one in that cult. And they went out of their way, deliberately confirming their hatred in writing, saying that they were going to do everything they could to disparage me. And they have ever since. They didn't start as little students that wanted to know the truth. No, they started as malcontent, cancerous belligerents. And in the process, the psychopath that started that cult became Miriam. Yeah, somebody that at one time was singing in the chorus of the covenant, like Miriam, only then to claim that we too speak for God, to have God strike her with leprosy, exile her from the community, and divorce her. And as we have found in the many references that God has now to them, particularly as he speaks of this upcoming harvest, which they claim for themselves, that he is deliberately excluding them and deliberately sending them to hell. Not my determination, although I'd probably make the same at this point. God's. And he's not going to change his mind in this regard. The only difference for them is how much time they will have their souls delayed from entering Sheol to pay recompense on all of the people whose lives they negatively affected. So keep it up. Doesn't do a thing to me, but it sure as hell is affecting you. All right. Those are the two things that I wanted to share. We're going to go back into the 13th Mizmowr. It was quite an eye-opener as we began it in our program last week. And so to return to it, and I thank Rich for bringing us back into the Ocean Studio. As you can see, it's a really blustery day again. We are really getting a blast of warm air being brought across our helm as we look out across the sea. It reads, The Majestic Conductor. This is Laha Nashak, a song of Dowd, the beloved. So, who wrote this? That would be Dowd. Who is Dowd? Well, according to God, he is the Son of God. He is the chosen one. He is the one through whom God enabled and established the covenant. He is the Messiah. He is the one that God is returning with and establishing as king forevermore. Besides that, there's not much to the man. So this reads that it is a song of Dowd. The first statement reads, Yahowah. Okay, once again, Dowd was 3,000 years ahead of the mother goddess Click, and that he knew and used Yahweh's name. He didn't write YadaYahowah as if it was a word or a name or a designation that could not be pronounced. He is speaking to him, and he says, Yahowah. And it's not hard, really. All one has to do is look at the verbal basis of the name. God gave us the verbal basis. He told Moshe his name was based upon Haya. That tells you how to pronounce 3 of the 4 letters, Haya. And then all one needs to do is to look at the name of the book in which God introduced his name, because he calls it his Torah. And the Wah in Torah is what delivers the O sound. It's also repeated by the Wah in Shalom. Yahowah, for how long, especially on behalf of the enduring witness, this restoring witness of the eternal testimony, will you allow me to be overlooked? Question mark. One of the reasons that it is foolish to oppose what Yahowah has chosen to do in collaboration with me is that over the past 3,000 years, I am the first to recognize what Yahowah chose to do through Dowd. That Dowd's not only the Messiah and Son of God, negating the idea that Jesus was that person. God says otherwise. And its titles are not transferable. But even more importantly, that when God said that he established the covenant, literally cut it with Dowd, what that means is that Dowd is our Savior. He is the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. There's no other way to establish the benefits of the covenant other than by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, which Dowd did. The first to recognize that, explained how it worked, how Dowd's soul was placed into a physical body to serve as the Passover lamb, and then his soul carrying our guilt into Sheol, never to be seen again. And for the Bakor, firstborn, to become the first of firstborn children by fulfilling Bakurim. It's not spelled out succinctly anywhere. I was able to deduce it. I was able to prove it. I'm the first to share it, to explain it. But this isn't the first time I've done so. I did it 3,000 years ago. The reason that Dowd recognized his responsibility and decided that he would honor this opportunity to serve his people and his God in this way is because I also explained it to him. And it's obvious. And as we move through the presentation of the last word picture in the library studio, you're going to be confronted with irrefutable evidence. And it goes way beyond being the husband, the Baal, of the Ashar, the Amma, the M, mother, the one providing the benefits and the blessings for Dowd. So far beyond, it's almost earth-shattering. So Yahowah, for how long, especially on behalf of the restoring witness, will you allow me to be overlooked? Answer, until YadaYahowah. That is when it changed. It was 4 or 5 years ago that after working on these books for all of this time that I was finally able to figure it out. I'm going to let this very annoying truck go by. I don't know why they decide that they need to drive by our home 20 times, but they have or why they don't have a muffler on their truck, but they don't. And excuse me if it gets to be a bit irritating, and maybe the microphone is so good and so dialed in by our beloved Rich that you can't hear it, but it's exceedingly loud from my perspective, and it's finally gone. Let's hope that it's gone for good. So, for how long, especially on behalf of the restoring witness, will you allow me to be overlooked? The answer was almost 3,000 years. From the time that Dowd wrote this, probably around the 60th birthday, someplace thereafter, between 60 and 70 years of age, which would have been, right around 980, about right around 980 BCE to right around 2022 CE. Dowd was overlooked. He was considered the boy who flung the stone. He was considered a very troublesome king of Israel. But that's about it. No longer considered the Messiah. Wasn't considered as the returning king, even though Yahweh said so. He wasn't considered the chosen one. He wasn't considered the Son of God. He wasn't known as the Savior. He wasn't known as the person who enabled the covenant. But he is all those things. He is the promised one. He is the most set apart. He is the essence of everything that God had planned for us. He is God's co-worker. He was not known as any of these things until I was able to deduce them and share them with you. That is the answer to how long he would allow Dowd to be overlooked. Then Dowd speaks of Yahweh as the Nasak, proving that I was correct, that he is not speaking of a conductor of instruments, but indeed of Yahweh. He refers to him as your enduring eminence, majestic and everlasting guide. For what extent of time will you conceal the direct and close association of your presence with regard to me? That's the essence of it, isn't it? Yahweh chose Dowd to be his co-worker. That's what he states emphatically throughout the Mizmowr, including the 89th. Yahweh chose Dowd's body and soul to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, to enable the benefits of the covenant, to honor the promises that he had made. And they did this collaboratively. Yahweh placed his Ruach spirit on Dowd, never to leave him. His presence was always with his son. And yet, that direct association between Yahweh and Dowd has been erased, trampled on by Christians and by Jews on behalf of Jesus Christ, the myth, and Bar Kokhba, the warlord. It's tragic, really, because collaboratively they offered humankind the greatest gift ever: eternal life, the removal of all guilt, adoption into God's covenant family, and essentially infinite empowerment, enrichment, emancipation, and enablement to go from 3 to 7 dimensions. All of that was tossed away. And once again, because it's vitally important, there is one person and only one person who came to recognize that. Now, how important would that person be when he comes to recognize it? 35 years, 30, years, excuse me, to be exact, 32 years. Over time, gradually over that 32-year period, before Dowd's return. Here I'm speaking to you 7 years before his return, still trying to garner Israel's attention so that they know that Dowd is their savior, the Son of God, the returning Messiah, the returning King. Elyon, for crying out loud. Elyon, full influence of God in our presence. It's Dowd. No one knew it or shared it. Not over the course of 3,000 years. There's hints of it in the prophets. Yahowah came closer to it than any. And he did everything but just lay it on the line and say, all right, yeah, it says that the lamb carried our guilt, but in that particular discussion, he didn't name the lamb. He just told you, if you want to understand this, listen to the man who knows the identity of the Zerah. And he does not specifically say that matzah was fulfilled by carrying our guilt into Sheol. But yet it's obvious. At least it was to me. And I've subsequently proven it. No one says in so many words, Dowd's body served as the Passover lamb, and yet that's the only logical conclusion that you can deduce from the prophetic accounts. But no one said it. Until now. And there's no more important truth to behold than that one. So he goes on. And by the way, if you think that I'm bragging here, go away. I mean, for somebody to think that you would choose, boy, I think I'm going to take that title Baal and I'm going to apply it to myself. What a great idea. People will really admire me if I choose that title. Boy, I'll become filthy rich. I'll have followers up the wazoo. What a great idea. I'm going to take that title and apply it to myself. Are you out of your ever-loving minds? Every time Yahowah ups the ante and he adds another identifier to the one that he has chosen to work through to restore his name and his beloved son's dignity, you go and put yourself in the crosshairs of all the belligerents and idiots of the world. And the more controversial the title, the worse it becomes. So you'll do exactly the opposite unless you know and trust Yahowah explicitly and are always willing to go where his words lead, no matter the personal consequence of doing so. But God was really quite clear. What do you think the story is in Bereshith 1, the first book and the first chapter of the Torah, where he speaks of the lesser luminary that he calls great, reflecting the greater luminary's light as a sign for the Moedim? What do you think he's talking about? When he introduces the two trees and the tree of knowledge pointing to the tree of lives, who do you think he's speaking of? Particularly when he tells you that the Towrah is the tree of knowledge. It shouldn't be all that difficult, folks. But the reason that we emphasize this, and I tell you that God proclaimed upwards of 1,000 times that I would do this for you, for him, for his people, for his son. The reason I tell you this is so that you would trust what God has to say through me. It isn't just a matter of study that I came to understand Dowd's role in all of this, certainly. I did see it as I was rewriting the Coming Home series. And as I was retranslating these and incorporating all of the moods into the text, it became obvious to me. But the ability to see how this played out is something, since no one has perceived it previously, and it came into my mind as a revelation, and then I'm pointed to the texts that demonstrate that it's true. What I want you to do is listen. I don't have a problem if you go and read the books. In fact, I'd love for you to too, so that you can see that I verify these conclusions. But there's no other way. God said he was not going to speak directly to anyone other than those of his choosing, that he was going to communicate with humankind through humans of his choice. And this is what he's committed to do. This is what he has always done. It is what he will continue to do going forward. Even until the millennial Shabbat, he's going to speak through those he has chosen, that he is positioned in places of authority. You can either trust him and listen to what he has to say through them, or you're not going to be part of it. You know, when embittered Miriam came and said that, we too speak for God, the way God shut her down was to say, when I choose to speak through someone, they know it and you know it. I make it abundantly clear. And that's the reason why I keep on acknowledging all of these many descriptive titles and names that God has used to describe this role. And it should be obvious, because guess what? There is nobody else, not even close. There is no one else, and we have run out of time. There can be no alternative. So, for how long, on behalf of the restoring witness, will I set forth etzah, counsel and advice? You've heard that word etzah before? Does that ring a bell there, King of the Cables? Etzah. Etzah is without the feminine ending, it means tree. The etz, you'll find there was the tree of knowledge and the tree of lives in the garden. Etzah expands the capability of those trees. It's taking a man and a woman, and when they come together, because etz is masculine, etzah is feminine, it's like taking a man and a woman, bringing them together, and if there is the spark, there'll be three, sometimes four. And together they are, even without children, they are more than they would be individually. Etzah is like so many of the feminine endings to important masculine terms. It blends both intellect and compassion, things that you have to have if you're going to change the world. And etz becomes tree with the etzah of counsel and advice on the entire picture or portrait that God has provided. Etz is the tree. Etzah is the tree of knowledge of good and bad, with everything framed and put into place so you can see the whole story and all the details of the story from beginning to end. Etzah is one of the seven spirits that were bequeathed to the Towrah. One of them also is Dayath, which is knowledge. So he is the tree providing counsel and advice on the entire story of knowledge. So for how long will I set forth counsel and advice on the entire picture, this tree of knowledge? Through my soul. Through his soul. Why? Because it is Dowd's soul that matters. He was given a new body to fulfill Pesach, and a soul fulfilled matzah. I have previously stated, and I will admit that now, that I was wrong. I did not appreciate why it would be appropriate for Yahowah to put Dowd, have him be born into the waning years of the third, entering the fourth millennia, by having him enter that life as a baby. So I assumed that perhaps 3 to 4 years, 4 being the time that the Passover lamb, 4 days prior to Passover, that the lamb was brought into the home, that perhaps it was 4 days, just like it was 4 years prior to year 3000 Yah, that Dowd's prior life had concluded. That might have been a reasonable time for him to be inserted, but even then, why? And even then, it's not consistent with God's nature. I thought it was consistent with God's nature not to have his beloved son have to endure Roman-occupied Yehuda for 33 years prior to the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim. But I missed something. I missed something that I had not seen because I had not considered the M of Dowd and her Baal husband, pursuant to Dowd's restoration, so that he would be there. But Dowd's quite clear. His mother and his life as a shepherd turned king of Israel was a horrible person that he barely knew and strongly disliked. And his father was a real jerk, a complete loser. And largely because he did not know the love, support, nurturing, upbringing, guidance, modeling of proper behavior of a mother and father, Dowd's life as king was not good. He was bad a lot of the time, a lot of bad judgment. He did not deal with men well or with women well. He did not know how to respond most of the time. And so by not having a loving and supportive mother and father who were part of the covenant, in that life, Dowd came to model Yisrael, whose mothers and fathers have not been part of the covenant and have given rise to malcontents. And largely that was the lesson of that life, is that Dowd came to model Yisrael, and it was only through this intervention that with a mother and father that Dowd got his life back together and his relationship restored with Yahowah. And once you recognize that, then you recognize that, well, you think that Yahowah is going to allow that to happen again? When Dowd finally understands that he's going to serve as the Passover lamb, and his soul is going to carry our guilt into hell, do you think Yahowah is going to place him in that position alone? That he's going to be like he was the previous time, without a mother and father? No. And so what do we learn? We learn that when Dowd writes his great dissertation on fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim in first person in the 22nd Mizmowr, early on, he says, I was born of a mother. I came out of the womb. I experienced the gushing forth, the breaking of the water of natural childbirth. I was nurtured on my mother's breast. He goes on to describe the very fact that he was born of a woman at that time. He had a mother. And then he uses a term that I will describe later when we go and retranslate that speaks of a prominent tree that stood by him the whole time. Never left his side. He spoke of his mother and her husband as his mother and father. And they were with him the entire way. And I will explain how the myths came to be of the baby, the mother and father, even of those people that were known as disciples, and what their actual origin was, and what their relationship was during that period of time. Because Paul didn't make it up. He copied, he counterfeited what had been. And so I've got a lot more, as does my wife, invested in this, than simply being your herald, than simply reflecting the King's light, than just being the tree of knowledge. And those things would have been enough for a lifetime, would they not? Through my soul, Yahowah inserted Dowd's soul into a woman. Matter of fact, what's really interesting is I traced down the Isaiah 7, I think it's 7:14, 7:11, 7:14, something in the 7th chapter anyway. That prophecy, it's the one that's stolen by Christians all the time to say that it is the sign of the virgin birth, and it says nothing of a virgin. But the term that is used is also used in the 89th Mizmowr. And when I came across it, I said, oh my, this is the explanation. And that term actually describes the nature of the person, indeed people, husband and wife, mother and father, that were brought to bear to deliver the very Son of God, whom they called Emmanuel. Not he is God. God is with us. So much more you can learn when your eyes are open, when you're receptive, when you're willing to go where the words lead. It was Dowd's soul. It wasn't actually his second life, but it was an extraordinary one. And he not only learned in that life what it's like to be supported by a mother and father, but God didn't allow him to be all alone, to have no one to celebrate the 7 Moed Mikre along with no one to comfort him, to guide him, to reassure him. No, his soul was loved. He continues, the dissatisfaction of having been pushed away, discarded, and disregarded is upon my heart and in my thinking every day. You see, in 982, I believe probably was the year, Dowd was 60 years old, when my wife and I delivered the last word picture and the 89th Mizmowr song. We didn't just tell Dowd that his role was exceptional, that literally the fate of the planet, the lives of every human, was hanging on him restoring and reestablishing his relationship with Yahowah. We didn't just tell him by walking him through the Towrah that he was the Son of God who would fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim. We also told him what his people would do to discard and disregard all that he would achieve. And it weighed heavily on him every day thereafter. Still weighs heavily on him, still weighs heavily on my heart to have God collaborate with this kind of gift, allowing the body of his beloved to be crucified on Passover to open the doorway to life, and then allowing him to carry our guilt into Sheol, to deposit it there, never to be seen again, so that we are guiltless, and then to have that turned into the lie of Jesus Christ and Bar Kokhba, religions of Christianity and Judaism, by people who are claiming that they're speaking for God and yet they're annoying God. It's aggravating. For what extent of time, he says, will the one who is in opposition to me be lifted up and exalted over me? Jesus Christ is in opposition to doubt. Paul is in opposition to doubt. Satan, who is the god of religion, is in opposition to doubt. We have a makeshift gateway that keeps a little Kara from running and being free roam, and it blew down. You can just leave it down if we're coming to the end of our program. If they go off and explore, so be it. They are dogs, and they enjoy being part of their pack. So we'll not worry about that. So that was the noise that went kaboom. Sometimes when we come out here to the Ocean Studio, the elements are they're as you would expect on a tropical island. Personally, I enjoy it, but you do have to be able to focus with the world swirling around you. I just think it adds a touch of realism to what we're doing. So the adversary in Yahowah Isaiah 14, when we are told that he wants to be above the Most High, the word that he uses is Elion. That is a term that is applied to Dod. It's the influence of Almighty God. And so his goal is to supplant Dod. Yeah, Satan knows he can't be God, but he thinks he can replace Dod. And he did, to create Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, all three religions. He came up with false messiahs. And he positioned himself as the Lord God of those religions on behalf of those false messiahs. And so that's who has been in opposition to him. And boy, when you go into social media and you listen to what these idiots say on behalf of their religion, it is just obnoxious. And they have no idea that all they're doing is annoying God. So while it's hard to imagine, there is something far worse than having mankind's most illustrious empire torture the Son of God, which is what happened. There was something more hellish than sending the Messiah to Sheol with our guilt. And that is denying what he has done, which is the essence of Judaism and Christianity. Naturally, Dod is disappointed that he has been discarded and disregarded, not just for himself, but also for the souls he tried so hard to save. Now, adding to this aggravation, he painstakingly and methodically explained his fulfillment of the Mikre, as did other prophets, and still no one was willing to accept what occurred when it played out as promised. Instead of showing our appreciation and capitalizing upon the gift of life, indeed salvation, the men most responsible for denying his sacrifice are venerated above him. Peter, Paul, Akiba, Luke, Matthew, Mark, all come to mind. Although I think there's one of those individuals that really wasn't bad. Shimon, recalled Peter. I think he was, they created a caricature of him. Paul did and Luke did for the purpose of promoting Paul's Gospels. I'll share my thoughts on who they actually were in a subsequent program. So I realize that it's easy to say that Christians are guilty as hell because they admittedly took each of the many hundreds of prophecies that attest to Dod's words, his accolades, and his deeds, and attributed them all to the myth of Jesus, as if God were a blithering idiot who couldn't distinguish his son from a mythological caricature that was modeled partly after Dionysus. A Christian position makes God out to be a liar and is preposterous. It is also anti-Semitic, since they blame Jews, not Romans, for killing their God. How does man kill God, by the way? I don't know. So while the Christian misappropriation of God's intent is obvious, what about Jews? Some might say that they venerate Dowd because of the Star of David, and I've discussed this in previous programs with you to say, nah, come on, there is no Star of David, nothing anywhere close to a Star of David. And the star is a pagan symbol that not only predates all of this, but it wasn't used in coordination with Jews until around the 15th century. And then it was a rabbinical token in Ukraine, where some rabbis wanted to have a flag, and they decided they were going to put this star on their flag. Who knows why? But the Roman Catholic Church picked up on it, used it to disparage Jews. The Nazi Germans used that same symbol to isolate, disparage, and harass Jews. And then they picked that symbol to which they had been harassed and rebuked, that has absolutely no correlation whatsoever with the Towrah and Prophets or with the Messiah and Son of God Dowd, as the symbol of their country and their religion. Well, they also are antagonizing the Almighty, whose name they happened to erase. You want to know the real author of that star? It's Bar Kokhba. You know what Bar Kokhba means? Son of a star. He was Akiba's false Messiah. So clinging to the delusion that led to the diaspora, Jews subjugated throughout the Holy Roman Empire continued to identify with this symbol of false religious hope. Mocking them, the Roman Catholic Church made them wear it as a sign that they should be disrespected and delegitimized, dehumanized, demonized throughout Europe, and they were. That's why the Nazis used it, and to the same effect. Therefore, to attribute this symbol of denial and degradation to Dowd is as delusional as it is disgusting. I can tell you quite certainly that when Dowd returns with Yahowah, at least 10 days prior to that time, all traces of the Israeli flag and symbols of that star will be destroyed. God's disgusted by it. Dowd, as a prophet, was able to see the future, but he was also surrounded in his later life with two prophets, both Nathan and Ethan Ha-Izraki. And so he was told all about, maybe even foresaw, Paul's epistles and Akiba's Talmud, and knew the effect that they would have on people he loved, those he was serving. He therefore came to realize that the deadliest plot in human history would be based on discrediting and discarding him, the greatest crime ever committed. It would be Satan's greatest achievement and humanity's most egregious loss. And that crime bears the name Jesus Christ, Christianity, Akiba, and Judaism, Muhammad, and Islam. We'll proceed with one more statement and call it a day. Return to this as we resume this program, hopefully with you tomorrow. You and I are in agreement that it is essential that you consider. You and I, this would be Yahowah and Dowd. And he wrote this in both the pedagogic cohortative and also the imperative, which means that it was expressing second person and first person volition, choice. Pedagogic means it was emphatic. The hiphil means that God, as the subject, was going to cause the object, which is Dowd, to participate in the process as if he were a secondary expression of God. Love the Hebrew language and the ability to communicate these thoughts. So you and I are in agreement that it is essential that you consider answering me, responding to me, Yahweh, my God. Illuminate my eyes, negating the possibility that I become inactive and die. Oh my. Sometimes you run across little nuggets, and I'm going to start at the end, which is not the right place to start. It's always better to start at the beginning, but I'm going to start at the end of this. Illuminate my eyes, enlighten me, providing my ability to be observant, negating the possibility, preventing, that I become inactive and die. I have postulated, and with good reason, that Dowd's first life was not as the shepherd boy, 8 years old, in Bethlehem, when Yahweh said, I choose him. God would not have known him. He would not have experienced enough of life to have shown that he was a good choice and that he had been around before. God has had numerous men and women be part of his covenant family long before Dowd was born into that life. And yet Dowd is called the firstborn of Yahweh. My conclusion was that Dowd's soul was Adam. That he was the firstborn of Yah because he was the first to be given a conscience, a neshama, in addition to a nephesh, and then brought into the nurturing environs of that garden. I think he was Dowd. I think Dowd was Adam. And one of the reinforcements here is that the reason Yahweh escorted Adam, man. By the way, Adam is not a name. It means man. This man. And he's always the man. It's always presented with a definite article. It's not any man. He was the man. And the man of God's story is Dowd. The reason he escorted the man out of the garden is described when Yahweh says that it's not good for man to be alone. Once God decided that he was not going to be able to continue to be the man's companion, not based upon what the man was doing. He was not passing muster. He was not observant, which God said was necessary. He was not responsive, which God said was necessary. And he most certainly was not reliable, which God said was necessary. And God said, if you aren't those things, then you're going to die. And he particularly tells us, as he is removing the rib from Dowd's sides to create a Chowah, woman, to support man, so that man would not be alone. And he specifically uses the verb that says that he, Yahweh, caused the fall of man, not for a negative reason, for man's benefit, so that man, once down, would have a reason to get up, so that man would have the opportunity to prove that we were worth trusting to empower to the extent of the covenant. And what we're told is that Adam was inactive. He was lethargic. He was sleeping on the job. He was in an altered state of awareness. And that as a result of all of this, that, he would die. And so Dowd, having some recollection of that experience, and maybe it was as a result of me explaining it to him, because I've seen it. Now, if I've seen it in this life, I sure as heck saw it in that last life. That Dowd's saying, come on, I want to be observant. Shine your light, illuminate everything around me so that my eyes, my vision, my ability to be observant sees clearly. And therefore, it negates the possibility that I become inactive and die. The issues with Adam. You need to be observant. He was not. You need to be responsive. He was not. He was inactive. And therefore it led to death. God is saying, Dowd is saying, I don't want that to happen again. He's subtly reminding us that he knew that he was Adam in the garden. So the beginning says, you and I are in agreement that it is essential that you consider responding to me, Yahowah. This is the reverse of the message that God delivers through the Moedim. In the Moedim, we're told to listen to Yahowah and respond to the invitations that he is offering, and that we come into this nurturing nature of his light and to approach him, because we have to be transformed from material bodies into light energy, being that to which envelops and enables our souls. And so the normal process is God speaks, we listen. God invites, we respond. Now, in Dowd's situation, there has to be a reflexive aspect of this, because Dowd is now going to answer by providing the means to enable the Moedim. So in his case, he is the answer, and it's Yahowah that must respond to enable the benefit. So it is the opposite approach, because now it's not just an invitation to us to respond to God. It is Dowd who is providing that answer, such that it is Yahowah who must respond to Dowd so that we can receive the benefit. Interesting insights, huh? Well, anyway, we've reached the end of our presentation today. I've managed to keep from being blown away. We've had a few distractions along the way, but nonetheless, I like the idea of being able to deliver these programs with the world just happening around us, because, as I say, I think it speaks to the spontaneity and the sincerity of what we're doing, and the reality that this is a live stream for us, stream from us to you. And so thank you very much for being part of this, for listening. And I recognize that we are definitely pushing the threshold beyond where any of us thought we were going to go in our understanding of who God is and what he is offering, what his timeline is, and with whom he is communicating. I think it is a great joy. It's very comforting overall. And I'm delighted that the core of you who listen to these programs are committed to serving with me, with Yahowah, with Dowd, as we move towards the millennial celebration of Sukkah. Again, thank you for listening. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch Yao on our next podcast.